Now that the eldest and other spiteful beings wouldn't be bothering us, the king returned to his subjects and celebrated the victory and the end of the kingdom's miseries with great fanfare. Everything gradually returned to normal, including our exciting lives. Not always peaceful, but also not troubled by invasions from another world. And little by little, our heroes and the common folk began to forget the sorrows of the past. So the kingdom returned to Galarion, but not without taking a piece of the first world with it. Miracles and strange occurrences, both kind and cruel, became the norm. Not that the citizens hadn't grown used to that. Of course, the Lantern King wasn't thrilled with the way things worked out, but who cares? Our leader and Nyrissa, the cursed king and queen, are ever ready to face the power of the eldest. Until that time comes, our leader spends a lot of time in the First World, learning its secrets and testing his new powers. The immortal king and his kingdom became a legend come true in Galarion. Sadly, the numerous misfortunes that befell the king took their toll on the stolen lands. Matters left to luck and state problems left unattended meant the stolen lands would remain a lawless realm. It turns out you can't be both a great hero and a successful ruler at the same time. Or the hero of this story couldn't, at least. The feud between Brevoy's north and south, which had been smoldering for ages, finally sparked the fires of civil war. We didn't interfere, watching as the forces of House Sertova and the Sword Lords slaughtered each other. Alternating between brief truces and fresh fights, Brevoy was flooded with blood and grew weak. Its leaders could only watch helplessly as their border territories were slowly annexed by neighbors, until they fell to squabbling among themselves. The butchery in Brevoy jeopardized the peace of the entire region. The Tiger Lords found it difficult to recuperate after what Armagh did to them. The barbarians remaining in Numeria weren't very happy that we sheltered the deposed chief and his supporters, but they were too afraid of him to attack us over it. That bomb has a long fuse, but it's definitely burning. I'm afraid that a few generations down the road, the grandchildren of the current Tiger Lords may want to retaliate against us for their grandfathers. Pitax almost returned to its former state. A joyful city filled with beers of dubious quality and deals of questionable legality. The old trade houses lost the crown, but they retrieved the property Iravetti had taken from them. Soon, Pitax became almost like a second capital in the kingdom, a thriving city through which rivers of money from across the region ran. Unfortunately, we get much less of this money than we would like. Governor Liachenza turned out to be helpless against widespread embezzlement. Maestro Bellavara gave the Academy of the Arts a second wind. Throwing out mediocre students and sycophants, she gathered within its walls talented visionaries, rebels, and freethinkers. Those whose gifts felt cramped within the walls of more respectable institutions. She managed to do what Iravetti never could, namely make the Academy truly famous, albeit scandalously so. And so what if, instead of odes to the king, the Academy releases sneering pamphlets and revolutionary leaflets? It only helps his reputation as a true patron of the arts. The stolen lands managed to eliminate kobolds, but not quite all the trolls. Even nowadays, unlucky travelers and hunters sometimes stumble across one of these huge man-eaters in the depths of the swamps and forests. Do they have some leader hiding out there? No one knows for sure, and likely no one ever will. Bartholomew Delgado still serves the king loyally. From time to time, he orders peculiar mechanisms and substances from all corners of the world. After receiving them, he spends a few days bragging about some great discovery he's about to make, then ends up gloomy for a few months. Then he receives another package, and the process repeats itself. At night, chilling screams are often heard from his laboratory. Unfortunately, without its founder, Varnhold never really recovered from the blow. Over time, the colony withered away, all the more so when its dwellers continued to disappear under mysterious circumstances. It took less than 2 years for Varnhold to permanently become a ghost town. The only person happy about the news was the king's new advisor, a mysterious and powerful wizard, who still serves the ruler loyally to this day. Agay, the Spriggan leader, learned a valuable lesson after surviving his meeting with the king and even regaining his tribe's home. Don't try to occupy seemingly empty settlements anymore. Instead, the Spriggans settled across Dunsword's wild borderlands and proclaimed it as their domain. Keeping the peace in a situation like that seems like the stuff of dreams, as evidenced by the occasional lost patrols and stolen cattle. Peace reigns in the caves beneath the old sycamore. The kobolds and mites continue to explore the depths and learn simple crafts from each other. Rumor has it, the first mite-kobold wedding even happened not long ago. That said, settlers still aren't rushing to build new homes in the area. Some kind souls even put up warning signs along the roads. Beware, traveler. Steer clear of the old sycamore. Another inscription soon appeared over the sign though. No keep going treasure ahead honest. Oleg's trading post continues to thrive, attracting even more travelers. Much to its owner's displeasure, a small town is springing up around it. Despite Oleg's grumbling, he and his wife are well regarded by everyone, and Svetlana was even elected town chief. Jod remained loyal to the king to the end of his days, healing the sick and generously sharing his austere wisdom with anyone who wished to hear it, and some who didn't. Having fulfilled his duty to the ruler, Erastil's priest peacefully departed this world, surrounded by friends and disciples. Tisana, Lamashtu's priestess, didn't remain in the king's service for long. One night, she just disappeared from the castle and set off for the kingdom's borders, preaching to anyone who would listen and granting the needy the blessing of the Mother of Monsters. Having participated in Lamashtu's ritual, Olika gave birth to a strong and healthy baby. Sadly, the child grew into an unruly and violent adolescent. Having maimed a peer at just 10 years of age, the boy escaped to the Gnarl Marches, fleeing the rage of a mob that tore his mother to pieces instead. No one knows what happened to the lad, but legends of Lamashtu's child, who sometimes kills lost travelers and sometimes leads them to safety, are passed on by word of mouth throughout the area. The lizard folk of the Longtail tribe returned to live on the shores of Candlemere, but they couldn't return to their ancient way of life. Living alongside people, the lizard folk adopted their behaviors, habits, and even religion. More and more of the Longtail tribe pray not to the spirits of their ancestors, but to Erastil or Gorum. They even began to forget their original language. I hope someone writes down their songs and legends before they all sink into oblivion. A delegation of wizards from Absalom and other areas appeared in the kingdom one day, asking for permission to examine the lair of the Lich Farneris the Thoughtful. After completing their research, the wizards spent a long time thanking the king for freeing the world of that monster. In their opinion, he'd been capable of causing the end of the world, maybe even 2 worlds. The sweet teeth departed on a journey, hoping to see as many wonders as possible of this world and others. They keep sending us news from every corner of the map. Their bright painted wagon, drawn by a bull mastodon, crisscrosses Galarion, somehow appearing in the center of one incredible story after another. After the victory, the storyteller abandoned his affairs and began spending a lot of time alone in contemplation. He eventually bid farewell to the king and left his lands. But I suspect the inhabitants of Galarion haven't heard the last of this mysterious traveler, for his own story is hardly finished. Amiri remained a pariah to her native tribe, but she stayed close friends with Nylak, who ruled the Six Bears wisely and taught them to survive in the unfamiliar plains and cities. The restless barbarian would often travel for long stretches of time, but sooner or later she would always return to her old friends, bragging about new scars and recounting new feats, many of which Nylak immortalized in song. Valerie stayed to serve the king, and to this day she continues to be a muse to many people. Not just bards and admirers, but to warriors as well. Honest and resilient, Valerie is not just famous for her feats in battle, but also for her patience and kindness, which she says the king helped her discover within herself. Harren became famous, respected by dwarves throughout our kingdom as well as our neighbors, even as far as the Five Kings Mountains. He's often been asked to help out or teach others, and he's never denied anyone, despite his grumbling. Some people even listen to his preaching. Lucky for us, there's a lot less howling about the end of the world now, and more wise words of moderation and humility. Not all of his disciples turned to Grotus, but everyone took away something useful from his teachings. One moonless night, Jaethal mysteriously disappeared. Soon, frightened fishers discovered her body, really truly dead now. A young elf named Nortellara came to the funeral, claiming to be the daughter of the deceased. She didn't grieve for her mother overmuch, and she began carousing almost straight away, moving from balls to feasts to hunts. She acquired a crowd of admirers and treated the king as though they'd known each other 100 years or more. Some even assumed they were, particularly close. Octavia stayed in the capital as the king's advisor and loyal companion. A true socialite, and one of the most influential and desirable women in the entire kingdom. The balls put on by Octavia were frequented by nobility from every neighboring country, and she enjoys bragging to barons and counts alike that she achieved her status all on her own, a common half-breed from no family to speak of. Only Rigongar spoils her happiness. They fight constantly, and she fears that his drinking or some other stupid trick of his will drive him to an early grave. Rigongar hung up his sword and began the life of luxury he'd always wanted. Admirers lined up outside his door, women and men alike. He indulged in every pleasure, wearing luxurious clothes and hosting orgies that would make Calistria blush. He quarreled more and more often with Octavia, who feared his drinking and unruly temper would drive him to an early grave. After these fights, he'd drown his resentment in wine. These days, he's hardly ever sober, and his trembling hands can barely even hold a sword. Ekin spent a few years in the Stolen Lands, and in that time won glory as the most rugged monster hunter in all the River Kingdoms. The ranger exterminated even the most harmless of the monsters around the capital, then moved on to other lands and new victories. They say the ruthless avenger and slayer of wild monsters made it as far as Katapesh. That's where his trail went cold. I'm afraid Ekin may have become the prey of one of his targets. Jubilost returned to the life of a traveling explorer, frequently visiting his favorite kingdom. He said so himself. His famous work studying the First World all opened with a dedication to his longtime companion, the king. Sometimes, during Jubilost's performances, all kinds of chaos would break loose. Viewers turned into unicorns, or would be teleported to the top of a cliff. Later, Jubilost would be seen arguing fiercely with a pretty gnome named Nerd. The arguments looked very sweet and intimate. As for Knock Knock, apologies, I mean hero, knock knock, he continued his questionably heroic efforts in the Stolen Lands. Despite whatever mess he fell into, no matter the danger he leapt into, he always seemed to scrape through just a little better off than before. Like true heroes, he simply never gave up, struggling on and meeting the challenge of each new day with a spirit that no mishap or misfortune could ever quell. The slightly inaccurate statue of him and the king still stands in the square to this day. The two figures side by side. I've always felt that, while the heights may be a bit off, let's say, it accurately reflects the size and spirit of the goblin hero who'd been nurtured by the teachings of his king. Kalika remained in the kingdom, though her desire to witness the world's wonders keeps driving her to take long journeys. But when she is home, she spends much of her spare time with her sister. They don't quarrel anymore, and have stopped dragging each other into trouble. Canera settled down in the capital and became a very busy entrepreneur. It seems as though every hour is planned, meeting with rich merchants or inventors whose work she's promoting. But on her way home, she never fails to stop at the market to personally buy some sweets for her sister. Between Canera's business sense and Kalika's charm, they founded and successfully run not one, but 3 organizations. A trading house, a shelter for tiefling children, and a school of magic devoted to Nethys. Despite all the woes that befell the country, our king remains a strong leader. Many noble houses from neighboring lands wouldn't hesitate to be related to him, and they regularly send a variety of marriage proposals. As for myself, the author of this book, Lindsay, who never chose a pretty nickname, I'm still here, inside my creation within the Capitol Library. I live just like I always dreamed, surrounded by people and books, and not a day goes by without someone turning my pages. My story inspired many others to take up the quill. My readers have written many fierce books, articles, and pamphlets, flinging truth in the faces of tyrants. What more could I dream of? I hope, oh honored reader, that this story offered you some daring ideas. Or at least some entertainment. In any case, it's time to set the final period.